Recently, I traveled over 150 miles across the Netherlands for 3 days on my bike to explore firsthand the urbanism, beauty, and bike lanes of the country. I would be wild camping to save money and using my cheap mountain bike as it was all I had. Not ideal, but it did the job. This journey taught me a lot, so stay tuned for a wild bikepacking adventure across the world's biking capital, the Netherlands. This video took a lot of effort, so it would mean a lot if you could subscribe, as over 99% of you aren't subscribed, and support me on Patreon, where all money goes directly to my university fund, and you get early access to videos and more. This was the route I took, starting from Utrecht, going to Amsterdam, down the coast, through the Hague and Rotterdam, then south to Brada and Eindhoven. After arriving in the massive Utrecht train station, I explored the beautiful city for a while on foot, strolling down the canal streets and past the historic churches. The lack of cars in the city made it a very pleasant place to hang out in, and I had my first encounter with the famous Dutch underground bike parking lots, which amazed me. I then returned to my bike and set off towards Amsterdam. I would be following the picturesque and winding River Vecht route. I got my first taste of biking in the Netherlands, and it was amazing. Everywhere I went, there was high quality bike infrastructure, and I didn't feel unsafe once. This was one of my favorite parts of the journey, passing through cute towns and along fascinating drawbridges. Even though there was no separated bike path, this narrow style of road prioritized bikes and made me feel safe, an idea every country should implement. I eventually reached the outskirts of Amsterdam, and it was amazing riding through bike lanes that passed under skyscrapers and alongside incredible infrastructure. The center of Amsterdam was busy and exciting, with edgy shops in the red light district, and I explored for a couple of hours in the early evening. I then exited the city center and headed east along an incredibly straight bike path, grabbing supplies for the night from Lidl along the way. However, the constant air traffic overhead from nearby Schiphol Airport kept me entertained. At 8 p.m, I made it to the pretty town of Harlem and stopped at McDonald's for a recharge. As the sun set, I headed east from Harlem and entered the nearby forest, looking for a place to wild camp. After not too long, I found a secluded spot, put up my little tarp setup, and fell asleep soon after. Soon I will release a comprehensive guide to wild camping and bikepacking in the Netherlands, so subscribe to see that. Although it rained in the night, I was surprisingly comfortable in my tiny setup, and I woke early to the sun at 6 a.m. for what would prove to be the longest day of my trip by far. I packed up, making sure to leave no trace, and made my way through the small hills towards the town of Zandvoort, famous for its F1 track. I then headed south along the great coastal cycle path, gently winding through the peaceful sand dunes for miles, and I didn't see another person for an entire hour. The next town of Noordwijk was very empty at this time in the morning, so I continued through and made my way to The Hague, the capital of the Netherlands. Here I explored the embassies, city centre, and Chinatown, and the city definitely had a different vibe to the areas of the Netherlands I had previously passed through. Soon, I continued south along canals towards Delft, a beautiful town sandwiched between The Hague and Rotterdam. The town really represented the best of the Netherlands, with beautiful, quiet canal streets and incredible bike lanes that strongly made me consider packing up and moving to the Netherlands. Next, I reached Rotterdam, a city that had been completely destroyed in World War II and had been rebuilt as a modern city, very different to anywhere else in the country. There were massive skyscrapers with crazy architecture and wide boulevards everywhere. This meant that cycling here was slightly worse than other places in the Netherlands, but still infinitely better than anywhere in the US. I crossed over the massive drawbridge in the center and continued south, with it now being sunny. In this section, I was fascinated by the incredible infrastructure around the huge metro area, including big rail yards, cool drawbridges, and roads that just worked for everyone, especially bikes. After Dordrecht, I finally reached the edge of the Rotterdam Hague metro area, and I soon approached the massive bridge crossing the mouth of the mighty River Rhine. This was impressive and cool, but also a bit scary being so high over water, protected only by a little fence. After this bridge, I finally reached some authentic Dutch countryside, where I passed through cute villages and along perfect, empty roads. Eventually, I reached the town of Brada, and this was my favorite town of the whole trip. The center was beautiful, with historic streets and a big church, and I stayed here for a while in the evening. As the sun started to set, I headed south to a big wooded area where I put up my tarp and fell asleep almost straight away. As the sun rose on day 3, I packed up and headed back to Breda, as I needed to charge my phone at a McDonald's as my power bank stopped working. After that delay, I returned south and arrived at the fascinating town of Baron-Nassau, split between Belgium and the Netherlands. The borders went straight through streets and houses, and it was a great way to enter Belgium, a new country for me. I then continued along an extremely straight bike path before turning to the east. From here, I followed an endlessly long canal covered by trees through Belgium for a few miles, listening to music and stopping to eat. Eventually, I left the canal and entered a big forest, with straight bike paths slicing through it, and I then re-entered the Netherlands. After traveling through more pretty forests, I finally made it to my destination, the campsite with my family, completing this epic adventure. In conclusion, this was definitely the best adventure I've ever done, and I learned how cities and infrastructure should be built everywhere. I definitely plan to do bigger and better bikepacking adventures soon, including across the whole of Europe next year. So support me on Patreon, where you can get early access to videos and 24/7 direct messaging. Thanks for watching.